We now call the meeting to order. If you could please rise if you are able, and pay attention to Councilwoman Hiller for the invocation, to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pastor Klinger, if you would step forward. And just because it's a little unusual, if you would mind giving everybody a turn so they can appreciate your
very unusual,
outfit.
Right? So, my T-shirt, I guess, not my orange tennis shoes. Is that what you want to show?
You could walk out and show everybody the whole.
Pastor, could you turn again, because the camera wasn't on you when you turned. So we can see your back. And pause there, pause, so that they could read that your shirt says "For the good of the city."
Okay.
Thank you. And with that introduction, this is Pastor Jeff Klinger, and we're so glad you're here. Pastor Klinger has been lead pastor of the Topeka's First United Methodist Church since July of 2015. First Methodist was founded on March 21st of 1855. It was celebrating its 164th year this month actually. For longer than Topeka has been a city or Kansas has been a state, the people at Topeka First United Methodist Church have sought to be a community of faith, existing for the good of the city. As downtown Topeka experiences a renaissance, Topeka First UMC is engaged as a member of the Greater Topeka Partnership. Located at 6th and Topeka, Topeka First hopes to be a bridge between the energy of things happening downtown and the significant need that exists with our neighbors to the west. And with that, Pastor Klinger.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you, Mayor. I actually texted Councilman Mays this afternoon and said, you won't be too embarrassed if your pastor shows up in a T-shirt, but we're doing this spring break vacation Bible school, and I was serving as part of that today. So anyway, grateful for the opportunity to be here. I wanted to share this as my prayer tonight and offer it in the midst of the work that you're in. Karen had talked about your goal-setting review this afternoon and kind of that look back and look forward that's together. This prayer has been attributed to Bishop Oscar Romero. Actually, it was written by a Catholic priest in Michigan. But we just offer it and invite you to give attention to what God has to say in the midst of this. Let's pray together. It helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said, no prayer fully expresses our faith, no confession brings perfection, no pastoral visit brings wholeness, no program accomplishes God's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything. And there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a presentation coming up. Here's the awkward walk towards the center. If I can have our friends of the Topeka Metro join us and the two individuals that are being recognized tonight. Tonight is one of those happy occasions in which we get to celebrate individuals that do excellent work. And one of the values that we have as a community not only is about celebrating the individuals that make our community, but those individuals who also keep it safe. And we have two individuals here that have exemplary driving record, and I want to have Ms. Duffy talk to us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, safety is job one. That's a slogan that's not just with the big car manufacturer, but it's the first breath we take every morning. And it's the last sigh of relief every evening that we've had a good day because we've had a safe day. Nothing exemplifies safety more than these two gentlemen that are standing here with me tonight. These two men have received an award that very few ever have the opportunity to receive in the transit industry. This is offered by our highest federal award. It is with the National Safety Council. They are the experts on safety. Tonight we honor two individuals for the National Safety Council Safe Driver Award of Honor criteria. 15 consecutive years or 250,000 consecutive miles driven without a preventable collection. That is huge. I think there are very few people in the nation, and we have two of them. Last year, Reggie Moore was honored. He became a Topeka Metro bus operator back in 1995, is now the third senior operator with 24 years of service. Reggie is known for being safety conscious when it comes to his passengers, vehicle, and work environment. His on-time performance is excellent, and in his 24 years of service, he has never had a chargeable accident. 24 years, not 15, but 24. He operates not only the 35-foot buses on the street, but also the paratransit, and Reggie doesn't know this, but I received a handwritten letter today from Mrs. Wright, and she is a passenger that you take very often, and she wanted to share that her expression of joy that we are able to take her back and forth to her volunteer work, and she pointed you out in particular, Reggie, and she said that she just praises God that you are here. So thank you, Reggie. Our second operator is Efren Mazes. He has been an operator since July of 2002 and is now the most sixth senior operator with 16 and a half years of service. In addition to being a full-time operator, he is also the ATU Union 1360 president. And so we appreciate his service for that as well. With over 16 years, Efren has never had a chargeable accident. He's very safety conscious, and he is one of the drivers we always put new drivers with because he teaches them good stuff, and that is important. Efren feels it's better to be maybe just a hair late and safe than to push that bus too hard, and we know that, and we appreciate his efforts on behalf of his passengers and our very expensive 35-foot buses and the general public. On the job, Efren is excellent about providing safety ideas to us and sharing them, and we appreciate all the thought and effort that he puts into his work every day, not only as union president, but also as genuinely an excellent operator. These two men are exemplary, and they represent the type of operator we strive to have at Topeka Metro, and I could not be more proud of them than I am tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for so much for your service to our community, and most importantly, for the service that you do for the families that are in such need of your services to this community, to take them safe back and forth. So thank you. Continue your great work and continue being an example. We now proceed with the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla.
Here.
Council members Hiller. Here. Clear.
Here.
Ortiz. Here. Emerson.
Here.
Padilla.
Here.
Jensen.
Present.
Mays.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
And Lester.
Here.
We now move on to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the 99.3 The Eagle Cruise Night 2019. B are the minutes of the regular meeting of March 5, 2019, and there's a list of cereal, malt beverage, and open after midnight license applications. Staff is recommending approval.
Bless you. We have heard the consent agenda. What is the pleasure of the body? Councilman Jensen.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval, a second by the deputy mayor. If there's no comments or questions, we now proceed with voting.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to action items. Item A, if the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout, amending and repealing certain sections of the Topeka Municipal Code, Chapters 5.10, 5.55, and 9.15, concerning cereal, malt beverage, and alcoholic liquor.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, governing body, we have action item regarding the changes to the ordinance related to cereal malt beverage and alcoholic liquor. We had a presentation on this at the last meeting, and then we provided supplemental information earlier in the week. And so if there are questions, we'll come forward, have Mary discuss or answer any of those questions you may have.
Any comments or questions? Councilman Padilla.
Just one quick one, and maybe Mary or Mr. City Manager, you can answer this. I appreciate all the information and detail that we've received. It's been helpful. Just from my experience in the past, have we had communications to the city from these licensee holders or anything in regards to this proposed ordinance? Any questions they have about it or any comments one way or the other?
I have not had any communication, council member. Mary, have you?
I have not either.
Brenda?
I'm not receiving.
No, sir.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. So this brings us into compliance with state law again?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Councilman, Deputy Mayor Clear.
Move to approve.
We have a motion for approval by the Deputy Mayor. We have a second by Councilman Padilla. Additional comments or questions on this item? Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to amend the existing ordinance to remove any additional fees or taxes that would be incurred above what is already in existence.
Is that
A motion.
a motion? So we have a motion to make an amendment to the current ordinance that would remove any additional fees. Do we have a second? There is, you need to call Mary up. Second, okay, so we have a second by Councilmember Lesser for the purpose of discussion. Councilman Jensen, Councilman Lesser would like a detailed
Yes.
discussion.
So essentially, I'm happy to bring us in compliance with state law, but I am not willing to raise taxes or fees on small businesses in order to do so. So essentially, I'm saying, as Mary Feeney mentioned last week, that it's our option whether or not we change the taxes or fees that businesses are charged, in addition to changing the rules. I'm happy to change the rules to bring us into compliance, I'm not excited about raising taxes. So in that case, I would like to remove that part.
If I could, for a point of clarification, ask our attorney, because my understanding is that currently we have the ability to assess fines. However, we are not doing it right now. Therefore, the language that we have right now does not preclude us from doing or not doing. It's just following suit. Is
That's-
that accurate?
We've had the ability to assess a fee since 1987. We just have not been doing it, and now the state law set a minimum maximum.
With respect,
Ms. Feeney, would you
Ms.
come
Feeney
forward?
last week said that we would indeed be raising taxes with this ordinance.
Well, that is true. These
the
are,
500.
these are licensed taxes that you can or don't have to impose. You have the option to do that. So are you, I just want to clarify, your motion would be to eliminate the public venue, the wine distributor, and the caterer's license fees.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I shouldn't say that. My motion is not to change what we're already doing. So if we're not charging a fee, or if we are charging a fee, the fee would stay the same. But
Okay.
if we're, with this action, raising or charging an additional fee, that part would go away.
Okay, well, you would be eliminating then the public venue, the wine distributor, and the caterer's biennial license fees.
Correct.
Okay. And the beer distributor license, which is now set at $1,400, you would not want to raise to $2,000?
Correct.
Okay.
Any existing
I understand.
fees, that structure would stay the same. We would not create additional fees or raise fees.
Okay, I understand that.
Okay. Councilman Emerson and then Deputy Mayor Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess also there, just a point of clarification, there is, on the bottom of 3, there's also some inspection fees change. And maybe they're going, I don't know if they're going, they were by the hour, now they're a set fee.
Yes, those don't increase. They just change. It used to be by fee, and now it's by
Used to be by hour, and now it's a lump
inspection.
sum or a...
Yeah, it's a lump sum, but they have not increased.
Ms. Feeney, a question on this, on these level of fees that are set right now, were they changed because the current, I know a lot of times like building permits and stuff, we want those fees to cover a large majority of the cost of that department. Were they raised because they weren't covering it?
No, I put them in the ordinance just simply because state law gives us that option. That is the only reason I put them in there, for you to decide whether you wanted to impose them or you didn't want to, or whether you wanted to lower them.
Understood, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Claire.
Can you tell me what line, where exactly is he talking about?
That would be line 21. There are a list of all of the fees.
Right,
So everything that is underlined would be removed.
so number 5?
Number 5, the strikeout, or I'm sorry,
Right.
the underlined $2,000 would be removed, so it would only be $1,400. And then number 9, 10, and 11 would be deleted.
And that would be a license for a year?
Biennial, these are biennial fees, every 2 years.
Is there, I mean, I'm trying to think of other people that have to pay licenses. So, most people pay license fees. I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? So you don't know what I'm trying to say. This wouldn't be like picking on them, hey, you're gonna have to pay this license, because a lot of people have to pay license for when they, somebody help me.
Well,
Yeah,
like
a
vendor, like
Yeah,
a peddler
vendor
license or a
license,
citizen
an
license.
event
or a
license.
Special event license. I mean, yes, there are those permit fees or licenses for various businesses.
So I guess my question is, why would we not?
Okay, we have Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. And maybe this is a completely different issue altogether, but if I'm not mistaken, weren't we previously, prior to this law changing, collecting sales tax on C&B? Is that something, does that have to do with the need to raise fees or any of this?
That's a completely separate issue.
Okay.
Sales taxes.
Councilman Lesser.
The only question I have is, can you give me a little bit, I understand where Councilman Jensen's going, and I tend to agree with that. The only question I have in supporting that motion is, talk to me a little bit about the public venue, what we were talking there. And my question, what I'm trying to get at, is in situations where we're charging that, do those also generally correspond where we're having to use some type of our law enforcement or any type of those type of parades? Is that?
No,
Some
public,
separate?
we only have one public venue, and that's Heartland Park. Public venue it's an arena, a stadium, a theater that seats at least 4,000 people.
Okay.
And has private suites. So Heartland Park is the only venue that meets that definition. There's no other venue in Topeka that would do that.
And when Heartland Park operates, do we, at the expense of the city, have to utilize any law enforcement out there for whether it's traffic control, whether it's anything like that? Do we?
That I don't know.
We do some functions. I'd have to have the chief answer exactly how that. But we do some. We do have a presence, yes. I would just offer to in lieu of public expense in that scenario, that the license for public venue would be the only thing that since we are going to be incurring some costs for law enforcement and what have you. That would be my only addition.
I'd be inclined to accept that.
So you're making a friendly amendment to his amendment?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
And the amendment would be then that there would be no fees assessed on top of the ones that we currently have except for public venues?
Yes, I believe
The only
that's so.
fees that would be removed, wine distributor, caterer's license, and the beer distributor license
Would remain at 14.
would remain at $1,400.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I think we had, Councilwoman Hiller?
Well, I'm looking at this and the fact that these new fees were in there was raised sort of toward the end of our explanatory discussion last time. It may be that we need to spend a little more conversation on this today and then have a look at it. What it looks to me, I mean, I'm the one, based on some side conversations that had occurred, that asked for the cost of the time. But these are just set with hourly rather than what our total cost is to have a clerk do something. I'm not as worried about that particularly because it's alcohol, because of law enforcement, and the fact that we issue these licenses with various requirements, which allows us to, even though we typically pass them on a consent agenda, it allows us to not pass it if there have been problems at that establishment. Because I believe that there's there's sort of a checklist of oversight that includes law enforcement that in terms of issuing that license, and that allows us a loop of feedback about how the operation has gone. I mean, we have, not on this list, but like dance hall licenses and so on as well, as I understand it. And I think maybe we need to put more thought into it. Somebody already mentioned law enforcement here, but one of the things the staff did was to take distributors of spirits, beer, and wine and make them all the same. And in some cases, it is just one distributor. And if we don't adjust those, then it's $2,000 if you're selling spirits, $1,400 if it's beer, and nothing if it's wine. It's a little uneven, and I think the staff did some work to at least make all three of those the same. And just spending a little more time thinking about that and looking at it, I think we probably should. And then the public venues and the caterers were one that was new to me, and there are a dozen of them that are currently not paying at all. And because it was sort of not mentioned in the announcement of this ordinance, I don't know if they know about it. But again, when alcohol is involved, that license kind of gives us a conversation with them, and I'm keen toward Councilman Padilla to maybe give us some additional feedback on that. But that license just says, we know you're handling alcohol there. These folks also are the ones who get called in for events, and we do license those events, but their reliability and how they handle their sales makes a difference. So I'm kind of looking through all of them and just thinking we might want to give a little more thought if we want to change what the recommendations are.
City manager?
The only thing I will add, Councilwoman, is that we'll still do the licensing. We just wouldn't collect a fee. So the process will still be the same. It just wouldn't include a fee paid to
I
us.
see. Well, I think we should be paid for our time, but also the extra time outside just the licensing process of, you know, if because alcohol's involved, it's taking us a little extra time to keep an eye on those venues so that when the police get asked for a report for the annual renewal or biannual, that they're ready.
Councilman Padilla, to be followed by Councilman Jensen.
Okay, thank you. I understand what Councilman Jensen is talking about, because I too had some thoughts about the fees. And Mary, I think our communication back and forth, I expressed that is, I know we can, but do we need to? Is there a justification for the increase in the fees? And if not, then just because we can, I don't know that we should. And my question tonight about whether or not we've had any feedback from the industry indicates to me, from my experience at ABC, they know what's going on. If they would have had some objection to the fees increased, we would have heard about it. At least I know ABC would have heard about it. And for most instances, it's the cost of doing business in that industry. They know what it requires, and they work that into their business plan. So I didn't see any hue and cry against these fees. So it changed my mind for tonight then to say, well, if there's no objection, and if it does offset some costs that we incur as an administrative process, then okay. But again, I wasn't comfortable at first with the idea that just because we can, we should go ahead and raise the fee. But ABC works hand in hand across the state with local law enforcement, and believe me, they pay close attention to where they're serving and whether or not they have the authority to serve. I know, like in other cities, they have venues, like you said, the venues where even in a stadium, they have a little section or a booth set in their own stadium that requires a different license because they in fact fall under a different category that way. And the locals know that, and ABC knows that, and whenever they have an event, they usually have agents there checking to make sure that they have the proper licensing and that they are making sure that the liquor doesn't move from those specific areas outside into the general area. So it's, the liquor industry is pretty aware of what their obligations are. Thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
So my point in bringing this up tonight is we're raising fees just because we can raise fees. We don't know what our specific costs are. I mean, I know there's a little bit of information out from the clerk's office, but to just blanket slap a $500 fee on a small caterer just because we can, I don't think that's acceptable. You know, I'm happy to defer this ordinance if we need to spend some more time looking at what our actual hard costs are. You know, we're enforcing alcohol control in Topeka now, and we're not charging a fee, and we're able to do it within our budget. So, you know, yes, I realize that there's law enforcement involved in this, but they're doing it now. So, you know, adding an additional fee on top of what we're already doing, that just sounds like we're raising the fee because we can. This impacts small business. I did not have a chance this week to reach out to any of these folks, but I would be surprised if they knew about it at all. You know, we only brought this up last week. I'm sure it was in the paper, but that's probably the sum total of the exposure to the world of us changing these ordinances. So, you know, I'm happy to bring us in compliance with state law, but again, I would also support the fee to cover our costs explicitly, but just slapping a blanket fee on people, that's not okay. We shouldn't be doing that. If we can line item what our cost is and recover that, that's fine, but we shouldn't just raise taxes for the sake of raising taxes.
Councilman Lesser?
That would be along those same lines, two thoughts. Number one, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, when we're talking about distributors, we're not talking about the retailers. We're talking about the individual who we're talking about.
A wholesaler.
wholesale, Strathman's who's selling the beer to the liquor stores and so. And that's along those lines, a little bit of it. To me, it just seems a little bit of a disproportionate where we have, major, huge distributors that are going to pay $2,000, $1,400, and then the small caterer like, Julie's Downtown or Blackbird or somebody like that, or even the small ones that they run out of a kitchen or something to cater for different parties and such not, they're at $500. I mean, to me, that just seems not proportionate for what the exposure is, and that's my only concerns along the same lines of what you're saying, and the caterer is kind of it doesn't fit with part of these, because the caterer is kind of the end user, in this, where all the other ones are, distributors or wholesalers, middlemen, per se.
Well, they're more
Just
like drinking establishments.
What's that?
Caterers are treated like drinking establishments because they are providing alcohol by the drink in an unlicensed premise. So they're treated.
Right, and I don't have a problem with the portion, it's just, I'm talking about proportionately the amount of the license compared to the volume that a distributor does.
Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm just out of curiosity brought up the list of licenses that we have in Topeka. There's a lot. I mean, haunted house permits, food trucks pay $300. And I'm sure Brenda over here would probably be able to go through a lot of it, but I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily opposed to these fines, but I do think that it sounds like there's a lot of uncertainty with the actual, or not fines, fees. There's a little bit of uncertainty as to the numbers. They do seem a little bit arbitrary, and I personally don't know if I feel comfortable voting on this tonight, but I think that's maybe something we need to think about is having a more detailed discussion. And we probably, I know personally, I'll say I wasn't as prepared as I should have been for this item last week when we discussed it the first time, that I hadn't really dove into the numbers, but looking at it, I think they make sense to have these fees on there and these licenses, but I don't know that the numbers are fair necessarily.
Okay. So with that, we have City Manager.
Mary, would you explain when we need to approve this by? We need to approve this by a certain date.
Well, state law takes effect April 1st. So ideally, I'd like to see this passed before April 1st. If not, the law goes into effect and you're going to have Hy-Vee and Dillon's still selling beer. But I think it's a little bit time sensitive. If you want to discuss fees, you could strip them out, talk about them later, but pass the rest of the ordinance.
Councilman Jensen.
So that's essentially what I proposed, is we've stripped the fees out with the exception of the friendly amendment. So if we approve the ordinance as amended, then we could come back and discuss the fees and change it again. There's certainly no reason we can't do that.
Approved ordinance.
So that would get the ordinance changed in time for the deadline, then we could have a more robust discussion about the fees at a later date.
I mentioned one thing, though. We wouldn't be able to reconsider this, in other words, for 6 months. We'd have to wait 6 months to add the fees.
Not if we approve
Not
it.
if we approve it.
Well, if you
becomes an
approve it, but
ordinance.
you strip out the fees?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Affirmatively hold that over.
And then,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Because it would be an
That
approved
a
ordinance that
problem.
we have that we then are going to bring back to modify.
Yeah, because we would have to bring back this ordinance, we would have to reconsider this ordinance to put back in the license fees or to amend them. But it sounds like maybe you want to send it to committee to look at the fees? Is that?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
Just get
All
some
right.
information.
Okay, so
I'll leave it to you.
So what we have on the table right now is an amendment to the current ordinance that voting yes for it would eliminate the extra fees that have been assessed except for the venue, the
Yes.
public venue. So, yes, Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally understand where my colleagues were coming from, leaving the venue. My only issue is Heartland Park right now is getting hit with so much taxes and stuff. I hate to be the one, that'd be the one thing that we impose a fee on, Heartland Park that's already getting killed with property taxes. So just for that reason, I totally understand where you guys are coming from on that, but that's the one I'd least like to tax with this additional fee.
Madam Mayor? Would you be willing to pull that out since we intend to discuss all these at a later date and then consider all the fees at a future date? Okay, all right, so.
Okay, so Councilman Lesser, are you stating that the friendly amendment is removed?
Yeah, I'll withdraw my friendly amendment, that's fine.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. So therefore,
I know you do.
trying to go by process, I have Councilman Mays that is judging every process thing that I do. I'm just trying to make sure that we're all clear. So he has removed his friendly amendment. Now we have a motion set in front of us, and that motion is to eliminate all the additional fees that were presented in this ordinance. Councilwoman Hiller.
For the procedural discussion that we had with legal, would we be better off to frame that we've got a motion on the table to approve the ordinance, but that we want to reserve consideration of all the fee pieces for 60 days, let's say? Is that a better way to keep it alive?
I don't think that's
okay?
necessary.
All right.
No.
It's very clear you want to
Yeah.
strip out the new fees.
Okay.
Councilwoman Clear. Deputy Mayor Clear.
This is not going to make me popular. I hear you about Heartland Park. I hear you about small businesses. We have to be concerned with the city. I mean, yes, I mean, Heartland Park has their problems, but our problem is how the city, how we can afford this, what this gives us. I know small businesses. I know people that own small businesses. I get that. But I'm not sitting up here. I mean, I'm that's not true. I need to look at both sides, you know, and just a blanket say that I can't put anything else on somebody is not a good reason to me. Not if you look at if this helps the city pay for what we need to pay for.
Council, so here's what I'm proposing. I feel like the conversation has become circular, and we're all repeating what we believe the motion should be. If the body would be willing, would you like to proceed with voting for the friendly amendment so that then we can continue having discussion on the item that remains on the table? He would do the friendly amendment, but he still has his amendment.
Right.
So we have a, Councilman Mays.
I think that the amendment's what we're really discussing, not the underlying ordinance. So I think the discussion's important personally.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Emerson.
I was just going to say, I don't disagree with Mrs. Clear. It's just like a couple of my colleagues have, or a couple of our colleagues have mentioned, they're so arbitrary right now. If there was something like they'd done a study and just say the public venue was costing us $750 to do, I'd be fine doing a $750. It's just right now, as I believe as Ms. Feeney testified, it was just an arbitrary thing to put something in front of us. So that's my only problem with it. And if the caterer's license ends up, if they tell us there's all this big process and it does cost $250 a year, okay, I'm fine with it then. It's just, I don't like arbitrary fees.
Councilman Jensen.
So we're not saying no fees forever. The point is we have to get this done in time to meet state law, and so I'm merely asking that we delay the fee aspect of it so we can have a more robust discussion, but make the changes that we're obligated to by state law tonight. So we would certainly continue to have the fee discussion in a more robust fashion. We just, unfortunately, at this point, don't have time to do it and still meet what we're required to do by state law.
City Attorney.
So, Mayor, thank you. On page 2, then, what the amendment would be is to, on number 5, leave $1,400 in and delete the addition of 2. So it would be $1,400 for a beer distributor's license, and then remove 9, 10, and 11 from the table, correct? Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Could we not, I think Councilmember Hiller suggested, can we not put this off till next week? And give them time to figure out more of a number, reason why they put these numbers in, and then vote on it next week, is still up before April 5th?
If that's enough.
City manager?
Well, I think we could, but I think one of the things you're going to find is based on what we have initially been provided from the city clerk, the amount that we spend in our effort is not going to reach 500, 2,000, or 1,000, correct? And so the amount would, that we would find would not be zero as our costs, but it would not be 1,000, 500, and 2,000. So the answer is that we could do that information and collect that, but it wouldn't end up being as high as they're currently listed. So, that's the bottom line. They won't be that high.
Councilwoman Hiller?
I would suggest that they probably would, and that has to do with law enforcement on it. I mean, our officers with their straight pay, as well as when you factor in the indirects of supervision, a truck, of all the stuff, our police officers are worth $150 to $200 an hour. That's what it costs us to have them on the street. And so $500 is somewhere between 2 and 3 hours of police time. And so if that alone, in terms of reviewing, keeping the peace and reviewing the permits and so on, probably justifies the numbers. Now, still, if we don't want to do it, that's fine. But just that.
Okay. Councilman Lesser?
There again, though, I think there's some confusion here. There's not any police presence that's going when Strathman Liquor is dropping off the beer at Burns Retail Liquor. That's what we're talking about here as far as the distributor.
Yeah, and I was looking at caterers. So, good point.
Okay, so, Councilman Padilla?
But the same thing, I can follow up, same way with caterers. There isn't a police presence there when that's happening. Typically, if there's an officer on duty and has cause for some reason to check on that license, they'll do that, but that's not a priority assignment for anyone. Typically, I know from ABC, the agents are the ones that look at that first, and if they've had some issues, they'll get a hold of local law enforcement to assist them with the enforcement. But typically, unless the chief can correct me, I don't think that's an assignment that comes to the patrol division and they say, okay, this week we're having these events, you need to go out and check those licenses.
Councilman Mays?
Thank you, Mayor. Mary, just to clarify, the caterer's license, this is not necessarily for people delivering box lunches to the office buildings, right? These are people that are setting up temporary bars at events, the weddings and the like. And
Right, yes.
so, honestly, I think that's something that probably needs to be licensed and have some sort of a fee associated with it. And I think to knock it down to zero is probably not a great idea. But, and I think that coming back and revisiting this issue at a later date, I think we're just going to have the same discussion all over again. And so I probably won't vote for the amendment just because I think that it's something that we need to address. Thanks.
Councilman Jensen?
So, and I don't disagree with you, but I think our fee should be proportional to our costs, and just slapping a blanket price on there, I can't agree with that. The whole point in my amendment was to buy us time to look over the fees appropriately while still meeting the demands of state law. I don't know that we can have a good, robust conversation in a week. That doesn't give the staff much time to put data together. I'm happy to set a specific day you would like to review or come back and revisit this, if that would make folks more comfortable. But we can't just arbitrarily raise fees to the top level with no data to support that. I can't imagine anybody would be happy with us.
Councilman Lesser?
I'd like to call a question on this.
Okay, do we have any objection to that?
I object.
Okay.
I'd like to ask it.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, number 9. I want to know if we pass this, if we have to wait 6 months to come back with that amendment. So we can't just, if we pass this tonight Is that correct, Lisa, when we can't come back and talk about it for another 6 months?
I think it
No.
would be subject
think it
to
would be.
consideration.
I think it would be. I
We'd have
think
to
you'd
wait.
have to wait
6 months.
So
for reconsideration.
even if it's amended and we pass it, we can't talk about this. Yep.
Councilman Jensen.
My understanding is that's only if a motion fails.
No.
This would not be failing, this would be approving.
No, we
and
can't,
then-
no. We
Madam,
can't, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, I wasn't through there. I'm almost certain I'm correct, so we need to really think about that. Lisa, would you like to have the floor and to say something? I think it's kind of rude when you guys are talking and we don't know what you're talking about. But, thank you. It saddens me that we don't have the data that we need. When these things come across our table to us on the agenda, it shouldn't be just, they're gonna pass it and let's move forward, because you see what chaos it's caused. I won't support it because I don't want to wait another 6 months to pass it. I think it's a good discussion, and I think I want to meet your timeline, Mary, but I also want to see, are we going to raise fees, or are we not? I don't want to wait 6 months and not do anything. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ortiz. Councilman Jensen.
So when do we charge these fees? I mean, are these people going to have to go out and pay the fees tomorrow if we pass it, or would it be next year anyway? So the 6 months doesn't really matter because they wouldn't be paying them until next year anyhow.
They get a fee, the license from the state every 2 years. And so they would, once they get their license from the state, they come in. So it would be when their license expires, then we would start imposing
So the
our
6
license
months,
fee.
if we have to wait that long to reconsider, probably doesn't matter anyway, except for maybe a small select group that
That expire in the
would
next 6
get
months.
grandfathered in. So I don't have a problem waiting 6 months if that's what we have to do, just because a lot of, this isn't going to affect most of these people anyway, because they won't come in for maybe up to 18 months. And that would be plenty of time for everyone to collect the data we're interested in.
Okay. Seeing that there's no further discussion, I think that this is the point in time in which we vote for the proposed amendment. Again, the amendment states that all new fees for every single individual would be withdrawn. And with the hope that we're going to bring this back after 6 months, if this passes. Well, actually, let me stop there, because right now it's just the amendment. So, at this point in time, we have the amendments in front of us. We proceed by voting.
Mr. Jensen?
Pushed it twice. That's still not reading. There.
Okay, we have 7 yes. Council members Clear, Ortiz, and Mays voting no.
7 having voting yes, the motion passes. At this point in time, now we have the amended ordinance for approval.
Move approval.
We have a motion for approval and a second. Seeing no comments, we proceed by voting for the amended ordinance.
Okay, we have 8 yes. Council members Clear and Ortiz voting no.
8 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item 5, the non-action items. Item A, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion on the proposed ordinance concerning electric assisted scooters amending Topeka Municipal Code, Chapter 10.35.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Governing body, tonight, we're going to have a discussion related to the electric scooters issue, an ordinance that we're looking to have you consider in the future. This is something that's been discussed among staff for a while. We've met with individuals from a couple of the different companies that have provided this to other communities that have expressed an interest in the future of deploying here in our community. And so we felt it important that we bring something before you to educate you and then also begin the process towards consideration of an ordinance to govern these. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Director Finder to go through the information.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, we wanted to kind of get you indoctrinated tonight on where we are with potentially bringing e-scooters, electric-assisted scooters, to the city of Topeka. I'm sure some of you have seen these in other cities. Maybe even you've been on them. But really our goal is bring these to the city, have them be successful here, and then have them be a benefit to the citizens and the visitors and the businesses of the community. So there's some lessons we've learned. But to that end, we do, as was mentioned, we want to bring an ordinance here in the very near future for your consideration. There are businesses, dockless scooter businesses, knocking on our door. We have worked with one to two in particular on getting to this point. But we have a few steps to go, including just like you said, education. And then also they're already here. There are businesses that sell these, and so legalizing them and having a process to have them be within the community is something we want to address. It's very timely. So actually, I did ask this, has anybody been on one of these scooters? We got a couple of hands, 3. You've probably, if you haven't, well, you could have done this demonstration then. This is my staff, Taylor Ricketts, doing a demonstration here last fall. She should, yeah, that's actually not an ideal demonstration because you're supposed to keep both hands on the handlebars, so don't do that. But yeah, this is a relatively new phenomenon. If you've been to other cities and you've seen these and you've used them, it all kind of got kicked off in 2017. Bird is probably the biggest one. They've started in Santa Monica, California, with a couple scooters. They're now, within a year, we're valued at a $2 billion company. They're in 120 markets. So they're the Amazon, if you will, of the scooter industry. But other companies soon followed. They're all over the place now in terms of different companies that are offering these services. It kind of falls right in line with the car share, bike share, like we have here in Topeka. This was intended to address that mobility gap of the first mile, last mile in cities. So you had that sort of phenomenon. A lot of growth happened in 2018, but there was an aftermath. That aftermath is sort of the technique that they used to deploy in cities, which was to really dump those scooters within cities and have people start using them without permission, either through the city, either by agreement or by having them be street legal, being able to use those scooters. That was an issue. It led to a lot of growing pains, a lot of angst, a lot of some banning within cities until they could get that sort of in order. And that, as I said, there was kind of a year for growth and growing pains. We got wind that Bird might be coming to Topeka. We did not want those sort of things to happen. So we reached out, had a preemptive meeting. That's where we had the demonstration last year. We learned quite a few things. Actually, it was a very good, productive meeting. And I think we learned that at least Bird and Bird a lot of what Bird does kind of leads the industry and others follow, but they're starting to realize that was not the best way to work and be partners with cities and communities. So they're turning over a different leaf when we met with them. We learned through that and through our kind of our due diligence, we do have definitely interests that are aligned. Our transportation choices, increasing transportation choices is a pillar of our land use and growth management plan to grow in place and increase our capacity to grow and provide equity also to those who need transportation. It's millennial friendly. This is a very important, is a priority age and demographic that we are trying to retain and attract. So that was very interesting to us. Revenue. Revenue is something we didn't realize until we did meet, that there is a revenue model that comes with these, that they do share a portion of the rides, and the scooters that are in the city do come back to the city. It's a small portion, but it is a portion that they are willing to share with us when we enter into agreements. That is really supposed to go back into improving facilities for bikes, pedestrians, and scooters. And then lastly, from a legal standpoint, we definitely have an interest. Obviously, as I mentioned, we don't want what has happened in other cities. We want a safe, orderly, and equitable sort of deployment of their fleet, and we want these to be street legal and allowed to operate in our city as other vehicles do. So, with that, we learned a few pro tips, which are pretty simple. So it's really a two-step process. The first is really we need an ordinance to legalize this type of vehicle. The state is silent. They're working on some legislation right now that would allow cities to do that. We have drafted a home rule ordinance that city attorney will go over here in a second and kind of compare where some of the highlights on that. So that's the first thing. That would have to be, that would come from you. So you would have to say this is a vehicle we want to allow within the city, and if you do, and with some basic rules. And if you do that, then we can enter into what we would call pilot license agreements with businesses, with vendors that want to come and bring their scooters to the city. We call them pilot because they're probably a temporary, like a 12-month sort of agreement. This is sort of the best practice that we've seen in other cities, where you outline your conditions of operating in the city, and that could be everything from the number of scooters that are here, where they're deployed, the rules for parking, the amount of data that is shared with the city. Is actually quite a bit of data that they can share through these, since they are all programmed through GPS and software. And so these are conditions very specific to that vendor that they would come operate. And then the last point is to deploy those scooters and assess. We may find out that there are, some of the market will thin through which one is successful here and which one isn't. We also, we need to assess how they're doing in terms of their responsiveness to any issues that come up. And so by the end of this pilot period, we can choose to extend with one of those vendors, all of them, or none of them. It's just, that is sort of the best practice in place right now, because this is sort of a new era. This is a lot of unknowns, and thankfully we weren't the first one to come along. Trust me. So we're learning from a lot of other cities. They're in I think Bird's in 120 markets right now. So, but this in recently talking with them, they're not focusing on growth this year, for instance. I don't know if that will trend with other companies. They're focused on more perfecting what they have in cities right now. So they've slowed down a bit. We're not getting that rush but we want to get ahead of this issue. We want to say, hey, we do want these types of businesses here because they align with our interests. But I don't think they'll come, or we'll get that sort of next sort of traction with them without having the ordinance in place that actually legalizes them. So I was gonna just pull up the chart. I think this is in your packet that compares the state legislation and our proposed ordinance, and have the city attorney just hit the highlights of that, if you will.
City Attorney, there's a question, if you wouldn't mind. Councilman Lesser?
And a quick question before we dive into that. Where we've mentioned the different vendors and what have you, are we only referring to accessibility with those vendors, or if Joe Smith, who lives in a loft downtown, buys his own scooter, does he also have the ability to utilize?
Great question. So the Joe Smith buys a razor out at the sporting goods store or online or wherever, and starts riding around town. So right now, that's technically not legal on the streets, which is why we would need this ordinance just to let Joe do that. The ordinance then will also allow us then to enter into agreements with companies as well to bring them here and have them operate on our rights of way. So it's a.
So we're not. It's like kind of like the bike. We're not going to force a monopolistic. Hey, you got to go use one of these, otherwise you can't operate.
I think that's the tack. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
Just quickly, what about gas scooters?
This ordinance that we're proposing doesn't cover gas scooters.
Can that be added?
It's something we have not researched.
Okay. Because there are gas scooters out there. I've seen them buzzing around my neighborhood. So
there are gas-powered bikes as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Well,
choose motorized rather than.
yeah. If we're going to authorize scooters, I think we should authorize all scooters.
Councilman Emerson?
Mr. Jensen, those kids in your neighborhood are going to be mad at you now. They get busted, but Mr. Finder, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate the research you guys have done on this. We sometimes, sometimes the industry will come to town and they want to throw something at us, and we maybe don't take the time that we should, and I really appreciate what you guys have done here. Sure. I did have a question, though, on, I don't see anywhere here, and maybe this is just the parameters, what riders can do, but the companies would there be some sort of insurance carried by the companies?
You want to try?
Yes, I was going to say, Councilmember Emerson, the pilot license agreement that the companies would have to execute with us in order to operate within the city would require them to indemnify, insure. The riders would ride at their own risk. If something happened, they would have to work with the company. But yes, all of that would be covered through that license agreement. That's going to be separate and apart from the ordinance.
And if I can, also, you guys maybe saw the CDC right now is doing a study on scooter injuries. And I don't know what timeline in the CDC, it's probably likely to be a year. But my question is, if we start this and do a pilot program, could that be something afterwards we decided, this didn't work, we're not going to do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we're doing a pilot. One of the things that we learned as well is that the early version of these scooters were not as safe as the later models. In fact, there's some what I will call cheaper, get in, entry level, get in the market models that were dumped in cities that were not wheels and handlebars that were not as durable, and particularly to take on streets in any city. So we want to know the right questions to ask these vendors as they come in and know what we're getting.
Fantastic, thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Okay, a few questions. and Councilmember Jensen opened up a whole nother can of worms. So they're not supposed to be able to go over 15 miles an hour, right? 15 miles per hour.
Correct,
Right.
that's in the proposed ordinance.
So then if you start mixing in, so if little Johnny down here has one that goes 30 because they're legal, but these can only supposed to go 15, then we've got a whole nother problem.
All right, so Councilwoman Claire, the vendors we are working with have the ability to program the scooters to whatever mile per hour we tell them to. So they
Well,
don't.
except our police will be, I mean, they enforce,
Right.
which I don't think they will. Number one, they got too much other stuff on their plate. They're not going to follow these little scooters around. But, I mean,
Gun
right.
out, yeah. They're not gonna get the gun out on. No. But no, so the ones, for the companies we're working with, so we're able to program them, and in those agreements, they come out of the box going to 22 miles an hour, and they can be programmed down to whatever we tell them. 15 miles an hour is the speed of basically a good bicycle ride. Not too intense. For those individuals who are buying it elsewhere and doing some, or some modifications, souping them up or something, that would be something that is, I don't know if that's addressed in the ordinance in terms of their speed.
It says, Councilmember Clear, that they can't go past 15 miles per hour, but that would become a law enforcement issue. If they were going over 30, and they could be ticketed in accordance with the STOs. Yeah, but you're correct, that's probably something that they're not going to devote a lot of their time to.
And then about parking them, do I understand they can come park these in my right of way in my yard?
They are, so these are for use in the right of way. They're based on the agreements that we have with those vendors. No, they're not supposed to park it on your private property. And in fact, there's ways to control that, either through a thing called geofencing, or you can take a picture. You're supposed to take a picture before they stop charging you to show it's parked properly. So we have some ways to address that in those agreements. Again, if they have some riders that are not following along there, that is something that comes back on them. And you, as a property owner or business, there's a number on each one of those scooters that you can call and get assistance from that company.
So is this company coming in and plop these down and say, here you go, and then they go off to some other place, or do they actually have an office here?
Great question. Low overhead. First thing, they do come in. They have a strategy of where they want to at least start I think it's 7 a.m. They would have scooters in certain areas of the city. At the end of the day, I think we are looking at 9 p.m. For our agreement with Bird. They have what we call crowdsourcing. They hire individuals online to come out. I could be one. It could be a hobby. It could be a second job. I'll come pick one up. I'll take them home and I'll charge it. And the next day I'll deploy it where they tell me to deploy it. So it's totally based, the local residents would end up taking care of these and being kind of employed, if you will. But there is no office here necessarily.
Okay, and one more question. When would this begin, if this all went through? I mean, we talking this summer, next year?
It can start as soon as an ordinance is passed. The vendor that we've talked to was talking this spring. I don't know if it's going to be that early, but that's what they hinted at.
Okay. City Attorney.
So, Councilmember Clear, also to your point when you asked when this would go into effect, the city of Wichita, actually, I read an article, I think late last week, that talked about the fact that that city is getting ready to adopt an ordinance kind of similar to ours next month, and that the scooters were anticipated to be out on the streets in May. So, we're kind of, yeah, it's coming. So this chart is kind of small, and you're not going to want to look up there and read it, but you should have it all in your packet. I'm not going to go through every single one of the things that are listed, but just what I've done is tried to do a chart that shows a comparison of what the current state law is, because what we're operating under now is the current state law. And as Bill mentioned, there is a House bill that's passed pretty overwhelmingly, I believe, and it's been forwarded to committee in the Senate, Transportation Committee. So we'll see what happens there. So we don't know if that bill will ultimately become law. So we have a column that talks about what's provided in the current state law and what's provided in the proposed state law and what we would propose for our ordinance. And if you look in the column under current state law, it's really not much of anything. They're very much unregulated. So what Bill was talking about, Bird just coming and dumping the scooters in line, if they did that, I mean, there's no state regulations that we could really look to or city law that we could look to help regulate what they're doing. So kind of the highlights from what we propose in our ordinance, even in the proposed state law, they don't have any requirement for a driver's license, and there's no age to operate addressed in this proposed state law. So we're going to require folks to be 18 years of age in order to operate, and we're going to require that they have a valid driver's license in order to operate. As far as what traffic regulations apply, it's going to be STO, the same traffic regulations that apply to bicycles will apply to these electric scooters. So we're pretty familiar with that. They can operate on streets with a speed limit that's under 35 miles per hour unless there's a bike lane. And if there's a bike lane, they can use that even if it's 35 or up. And currently, the proposed ordinance is written so that they are able to operate on sidewalks, with the exception of sidewalks within the downtown area. So that's something that you may want to consider and discuss. Equipment regulations, again, it mirrors the proposed state law. You have to have headlights, rear view mirrors, reflectors, and also you have to yield the right of way to pedestrians, and you have to do an audible if you're going to pass someone, same as with a bicycle. And as to the parking issue that Councilmember Clear raised, and that's a really good issue, and that's one that we talked a lot with the Bird representatives about, because that was what we thought would be the primary concern, other than if somebody, got on halfway intoxicated and flipped over and cracked their head open. But it was the parking issue, that folks would come, finish their ride, and then just throw their scooter in the middle of the sidewalk, and then if you're trying to get into your bank to cash your paycheck or whatever, you wouldn't be able to pass easily. So right now, the new state law really doesn't have any firm regulations on that, but in our proposed ordinance, we do say that no parking in the streets or sidewalks if you're blocking pedestrians, and there's a definition for pedestrian way. So I think it's like 4 feet. You can't park in that area. You can't park on private property unless the owner consents to that, and you can't block access to buildings, bike racks, and that type of thing. So that was very important for us to include in our ordinance. I think those are the major highlights. We're going to wait and see what happens with the state. I know, Doug, were you talking with Whitney about whether or not it'd go into the Senate committee or not? I'm not sure if it's already gone through committee in the Senate, but it was scheduled to have happened this week.
It's scheduled to go tomorrow to the Senate.
Tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, so we may know more after that.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you. So several questions. Having been on these before, I have mixed feelings. In the places I've seen them, it was a bit of a mess. However, that was early on in their deployment. And a lot of those initial issues, I'm told, have been resolved. I did reach out and talk with a gentleman named Sam at Lime Scooters. And a couple of the things that he and I have discussed, I thought were fairly interesting. That particular vendor actually has a program for low-income folks and people that are unbanked. You can actually go to Walgreens and sign up there, and then if you don't have a smartphone, you can actually text to unlock, which I was particularly interested in. One of the biggest challenges we face in Topeka is transportation options, especially for those folks that don't have vehicles and that sort of thing. So, that's a creative option, I thought. I never thought about using text message to unlock a scooter. That seems like a fairly innovative way. to solve what is a transportation issue. I don't know that requiring a driver's license is a good idea. You know, one of the biggest challenges folks face that have lost their driver's license is that they almost then automatically lose their jobs because they can't get to work. So, you know, I would really want us to revisit that because if somebody doesn't have a driver's license, this would be an option to get them to work. Also, you know, we have kids that need to work and go to school and that sort of thing. So I don't know that 18 is a good idea either. I would be interested in considering, you know, if safety is an issue with a 16-year-old driving 15 miles an hour, you know, perhaps technology would limit them to 10 or something along those lines. So that sort of thing. But, you know, if our goal is to provide additional transportation options in our community, I think this is definitely a viable option, but there's some things we should definitely consider there. A couple of comments on the gas scooters. We're not going to run into that issue with these vendors. None of these vendors are going to bring in gas scooters. That's only for the folks that have already bought them. They've already got them. They're already riding them. So what I would ask is that we just add that to this ordinance that would basically permit you to, you know, you can own one and drive it, same 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, same rules. You know, my car will drive 80 miles an hour, but that doesn't mean I'm going to drive it that fast, because if a cop catches me and writes me a ticket, I'm in trouble. The other question I had was on the bike racks. So are they not allowed to park them in bike racks? It seems like we would want to encourage people to use existing parking facilities already.
Yes, they would be allowed to, in fact, they're encouraged to put them in bike racks. They just don't want to block access to a bike rack. That's how we would write the condition in these agreements.
So my follow-up to that then is, have we reached out and talked with anybody at Metro? Because last I checked, they procured the largest fleet of bike racks in town, and would they be amenable to this?
Yes, we have. They were part of the original meeting. They have been kind of with us throughout all of our due diligence and have given the nod, if you will. They've tried, they're not at this point allowing them on their buses. I think from a size consideration, I'm not sure.
Well, if they're everywhere, you wouldn't need one on a bus anyway.
But again, yeah, making that connection, just like with the bike shares. But they are are amenable to bringing these. Yes.
So one follow-up question: is there an option? And I've only talked with the one vendor. Is there an option with these vendors that when you sign up, we can have 5 bullet points on the screen that are the highlights of the rules of the road? You know, obviously, if we're limiting their speed, we don't need to cover that. But you know, what streets you're allowed to drive on? Just, you know, because when I've jumped on these things and gone, you unlock that sucker and you're away. You don't have to do anything in terms of, you know, making sure you know what you're doing or that sort of thing. So is that an option within their software, or can we have them affix some sort of placard to the actual scooter with maybe the top 5 rules that we really want them to have riders follow?
Councilmember Jensen, actually, it's funny you mentioned some of these things, because we have a low-income customer plan as one of the provisions in our proposed license agreement. And we also have an education, communication, and outreach piece that does some of those things that you're mentioning right now. So it's interesting you're talking about that. We've got that covered in here.
Excellent.
And it should be pretty simple, especially if you're using a phone. It would just send you a text message with those rules. So just food for thought. Councilman Lesser.
Couple other questions. I'm kind of along the same lines as Councilman Jensen in regards to the age limit and driver's license for a lot of the same reasons that he shared. If I am correctly, unless it has changed, I mean, currently a moped, for instance, does not require a driver's license. Is that still?
If they have to be licensed by the state with a license tag, then you have to have a driver's license. Okay. So some of those scooters are underneath the CCs or the requirements for.
Because where I'm going is, I have noticed, you know, I know there are individuals who have lost the ability to operate a motor vehicle, but do drive scooters, are able to get to and from work on scooters, even though they lost their driver's license due to
Yes, sir.
alcohol infraction.
Scooters and mopeds
Right.
are a very formidable form of transportation for those individuals.
That would be the other reason why, in regards to the driver's license, along those same lines, as well as then on the youth. The only other thing that I would add would be maybe if we are going to, use 16 as an age, that we then do maybe incorporate that. If you're under 18, you have to wear a helmet, possibly. Just a thought. And then, lastly, the other question is, because we are going to have to, jump onto this at some point in time. My question is, because I don't know the answer, is can you get a DUI on one of these scooters? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
You can't get, I don't think you do.
what's that?
Councilwoman Hiller.
I think people did some research, you can get one on a bike? Oh, people thought they were exempt. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
DUI with wheels.
Additional questions or comments for the staff? Deputy Mayor Clear.
So if we have the under 18, then we have to get the parents involved, don't we? I mean, they'd have to sign that their kiddo could ride it?
It's not a company.
I don't, yeah, that would be because.
That's up to the company?
Yeah, Councilmember Clear, that the company assumes, or the user assumes the risk, so, yeah, that's the company's job.
Councilman Lesser to be followed by Councilman.
Other than there, again, we still have the private, I mean, that's the other thing, is we can't rely on what the company says is, because private individuals can have it as well.
Councilman Jensen?
I just want to compliment the staff for being proactive in this case. I mean, these things are coming. People are buying them and riding them now, and the fact that you guys reached out to start working with the various vendors and encouraging them to come to our community and help us address our transportation needs. Other than the few comments I have, I think this is a fairly reasonable ordinance and an excellent start. So, kudos and thank you for being proactive to help solve our problems. This is great.
Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. Bill, one thing I have, it's sort of related here. Is this going to affect kids with like their hoverboards and things, or driving down the sidewalk? Because, my 7-year-old likes to ride around in the driveway. Is that going to be an issue?
If he's in your driveway now.
He's ridden it downtown too. So, I mean, is that an issue?
Well, don't tell Chief Cochran.
Councilmember Mays, the hoverboard wouldn't be covered by this definition, so I don't know, we'd have to look into that a little bit further.
It wouldn't? I mean, it's a two-wheeled electric.
The deck.
I mean, it appears to fit the description. And it goes up,
Yes, I don't know
it goes about 10 miles an hour. I mean,
Yeah, it certainly wasn't the intent of the definition that we are proposing, or what is at, probably with the state legislation either. There was no definition, so we have to come up with ones to fit this type of vehicle. Whether that also fits another type of vehicle you just described, I guess we would need to look at.
thanks.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? Councilwoman Hiller?
Where did we leave the conversation amongst this group about helmets?
There was a request by Councilman Lesser that we consider having the helmets, especially if the individuals are below the age of 18.
I thought that's what I heard. I think helmets are not required on motorcycles or bicycles. Under 18, and they're not required on bicycles at this point. It desired and encouraged, just something to think about as we consider that, particularly with the discussion of low-income folks and people who are absolutely relying on it as a form of transportation, just for consideration.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. And there's actually a thing, I don't know if it's in our packet or maybe I read it online, but one of these companies will actually send you a free helmet.
Yeah.
You just pay for shipping.
Which is really cool. The issue would be requiring it and just to consider.
And I am with my colleagues on that. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. And we're seeking volunteers the next time for a demo when we bring this back, okay? So
Come in. All right. We now move on to item B, if the clerk would read.
B is an overview of the city's first rapid process improvement event.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Governing body, tonight, this is the first presentation related to the RPI process that we started working on about 4 months ago. We have sent various individuals through training to be facilitators. They've come back. We went through a process of determining different processes that we wanted to study. And tonight, staff is here to give you a presentation. Shelley Starr is here she was the team leader related to the first process that we went through. They spent about 5 days working together through a facilitated event to study a designated process. And what they studied was the claims process. And so tonight, Shelley will brief you on that process that they reviewed and the outcomes that they had. The members of the facilitators are over there, and then also members of the team are also here. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Shelley to brief you on the work that they did.
Mayor, members of the body, I'm Shelley Starr, Chief of Litigation, and yes, several members of the team are here also, and the facilitators. I just want to give you a little background on this because this was kind of a major commitment that we had. We had 5 team members and 3 facilitators that committed to an entire week from 8 to 5, focusing solely on improving the tort claims process. So it was kind of a big deal. This was the very first one that we did. None of us really knew what to expect in this process, but I think that we came away with this realizing that looking at our processes and how we're serving our citizens and our internal citizens or customers as well is a good idea. The mission of our RPI process was to create a standard operating procedure that was efficient, effective, understood and agreed to by participants. And what we did is we broke down this process to the very tiniest steps. And it was really eye-opening because we saw how many steps there really were in this process. And we put it under a microscope, so to speak. So what we did is about a year or so ago, we looked at the tort claims process and we decided that we would put it in CityWorks as a way of trying to keep better track of it and maybe give the other departments access to the system, and it's more of a tracking process. So we did that, but then we realized that created some other glitches and issues with the system. So this RPI process gave us an opportunity to really look at everything. So part of the problems were that like CityWorks isn't used by all the departments, so that was kind of an issue. Trying to gather data to report, like on Cora requests, or just trying to figure out how many tort claims we had and what we paid and so on. That was a challenge. There were a number of delays, and there was just a number of glitches in the process. The team itself, we've kind of already talked about. Lisa Robertson was what we call the champion. So we essentially had to report to her, and she was accountable for everything that we did. Our facilitators, Kelly Kelly Baker was our main facilitator, and Captain Harden and Mike Hall were facilitators. And we had representatives from the clerk's office and from HR, and then from legal as well. Some of the barriers that we identified, we found out that we weren't getting all of the information that we needed because some of our people were handing out old claim forms that didn't have all the information on it. We were not getting consistent end of the year numbers. The check delivery was delayed for several reasons. And then there were also multiple levels of approval that we were dealing with. And that's just a few of the barriers that we had. So through this process, and I've got a couple of slides that will give you a better picture of this, but we identified 122 individual steps in this process. So I had no idea there were that many steps in this process, and there's a lot of people that touch the process as well. But we were able to eliminate 14 of those steps, and that's just so far. We are continuing to work on the process, but it also gives us a mindset, a whole nother frame of mind when we're doing everything. It's like, wait a minute, do we really need to do it this way? Or is there a better way that we can do it? It changes the way we actually work through everything. This is a picture of all of the steps that we put up. And on the left, you'll see the different people that touch the process. And then for each person, and this includes the claimant, the person who files the claim, but each person that touches the process, we did a different sticky note for each step of the process. The bright pink sticky notes are places where there was waiting of some sort or delays. There was also the green sticky notes, which don't stick out that much, but those were places in the process where someone had to take something and deliver it somewhere else. So it's a really good visual as to how this process works. And it jumps around from one line to another line and then back up to this line. And it's amazing how they charted this out. This next slide shows you the bright pink rectangle there shows the processes that we were able to eliminate, or the steps that we were able to eliminate from the process. And as we continue to work through it, there's an implementation portion to this. So during this implementation portion, we are continuing to eliminate even more steps from the process. It's quite an interesting, I think, and very good process to go through. I think there's been another one since the tort claims process, but tort claims was the very first one that we've done. We generated several solutions to improve the process, and some of those included revision of the municipal code. Now, you haven't seen that yet, but that is going to be coming up in a couple of weeks, I believe, to look at it. We haven't looked at the tort claims process or the municipal code portion of it since like 1990. So there are some things, some barriers that we'd like to eliminate, like the appeals process, some of those types of things. We also realized that like human resources, the fire department and the police department don't use CityWorks generally, so they weren't using the system with regard to the claims process. And we've figured out a way to get them on board with that. And also, one of the things that we identified is that that litigation, specifically me, wasn't doing a very good job of really letting you know what the results of a lot of the things were that we were doing. Like, you see the claims, but then you don't really see what happens at the end of the process and how it plays out. And so I'm going to do a better job of that as well. So, like I said, we have an implementation plan, and we revisit and work on the solutions that we've identified in this plan over the next 30, 60, and 90 days. The whole team will meet again after 30 days, which is next week, and then 60 days and 90 days. So I think that we'll see some changes. I think, so by law, the tort claims process is 120 days. And we were seeing some of these claims butting up against that 120 days. And so our goal is to try to get these processed within a 90-day period instead of 120 days. And we've looked at a number of solutions that I think will make that possible, at least for the vast majority of the claims. Another thing that you might want to know is that the result at the end of the week was that we had what we call a playbook, and that is a document that itemizes out what everybody does, and it's like a standard operating procedures for the tort claim process. And to me, that is one of the biggest benefits of the RPI process, besides improving it, is just to getting it down and getting a document that can be referenced by everybody that uses or is involved in that process. One of the implementation items was just simple reminders to people who, it gets sent to them, and then the question is, well, they get onto something else, and just reminding them, hey, this is still sitting here for your action. And that'll be done automatically without having someone go in and say, hey, can I get this? So anyway, this was a real enlightening process for me. Looking at this critically and through new eyes was really a good process, and I think it's something that will enhance a lot of the processes in the city.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do we have any questions for Ms. Starr? Councilman Jensen.
No question, but a quick comment. I am so excited to see how well this has worked, and congratulations to you and your team for, this can't have been an easy process to go through, but I think that things like this will really help us become a much better city, and thank you so much for endeavoring to improve and continue to improve. I think this is wonderful.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, thank you so much for your presentation. This is one of those things that when city manager was talking about his interest in the city of Topeka, he talked about Lean Six Sigma processes. And this is a perfect example of the things and the projects that we do. So it's great stuff. Thank you. We now move on to item C, if the clerk would read.
C is discussion of the proposed 2020 to 29 CIP and the 2020 to 2022 CIP.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight I have just a few opening comments, and then we'll take questions. With regards to the amendments to the budget, the capital improvement budget, right now we have tentatively scheduled April 2nd for the discussion on the City Hall amendment. So if you're looking at that, we're in the process of gathering the data related to requests that were made regarding the short plan and the analysis of that, and so staff is working on that, and we'll bring that forward on April 2nd. We've received a couple of other amendment requests, and we've cataloged those, and staff is analyzing them. If you have amendments that you haven't submitted to staff, we would appreciate that you do so in order for us to be able to work towards packaging that and explaining the impacts of those. And it takes a little bit of time for us to analyze the movement of a project from year to year and what that impact would be. We want to be able to give you good answers with regards to that. And so if you could please send those to us, we will be looking to approve the CIP at April 2nd, if at all possible. That's our target date to consider the amendments and give approval.
Thank you very much. We do have some individuals signed up for public comment. Before we proceed with any comments or questions, the first person signed up to speak is Dawn Bueller. Dawn Bueller? Okay. Then the next person signed up to speak is Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, governing body. I don't have complete notes tonight because I've been digging through this in the last few days. One of the concerns I have is about City Hall. It's really not the most exciting topic that people are talking about in Topeka. They'd rather have their streets fixed. They'd rather have on-time snow removal when we have really bad storms. And nobody's complaining about the small ones. But there are people who live on hills in this town and they're not getting snow removal even after 3 and 4 days of ice. So this is really not the hottest topic about remodeling City Hall right now. I've asked questions and have not received answers. How old is the AC plants that we're replacing? Sent several emails to different people. Felt like I was kind of snubbed. Wasn't getting answers. And I said, why? I'm a taxpayer. I pay taxes here. A lot of the questions I ask, other people would like to ask, but they're not going to come down this podium. They don't have that persona. But one of the things I want to make sure is that I'm going to talk about several topics. Southeast California, I want to make sure that that gets done in the next few years. One time that project was completely shoved off for 12 years. A number of years ago, I had to get back involved in it when I was running as president of Pinecrest. We got it finally finished in 17, 29th to 37th, but now that next stretch, I see it's proposed for 2022. I had hoped for 2021 since the county should be done by 2020 with their work on 29th. I don't want to see that fall through the cracks. I'm glad we've still got the KTA money, design money in there in CIP. That is being worked on. That is being discussed. I don't speak for KTA, but I will tell you that at least people are now talking to the CO and other people and their CFO and having discussions. Of course, we've got a lot of problems with our state system of highways on top of that, which KTA is not part of. And so there's a lot of needs out there that are not being met statewide on a lot of highways, but that's a separate topic. I am supportive of this weir retrofit, but I do hear from at least one of the council that they're questioning the cost. Can we do this cheaper with local rock, things like that? And I guess the thing I want to say tonight as a citizen, I watch a lot of these meetings where I come down here, and I don't want pushback against the council when they ask questions, and I don't want pushback if they suggest cheaper ideas how to get things done. They represent the people, and this government is from the top down. It's not staff up. And I just feel like that needs said after observing some of the things I've observed over the last few months. When the pushback comes on staff, you're really pushing back on the people. The people are the ones who pay the taxes here. And we have a lot of good ideas that I think we need to be engaged. And I think the more you're engaged with the people, you'll have people that are a lot happier working with the city. But when they feel like they're getting pushed down on and they're being treated rudely, they're going to react in a way that's not going to be pleasant because they actually run this city. They pay the taxes.
Mr. Ledbetter, would you like some additional time?
No,
Your
I'm
time
good.
has expired.
But I thank you for the request. And I think I've got another meeting I've got to make, so I've probably missed public comments to the relief.
Thank you, Mr. Ledbetter. Okay, there is no other individual signed up for public comment with regards to this issue. What are the comments or questions that the body has for city manager? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to just tell a little story, if I could, preceded by an apology for last week. I think my comments were pretty intense. I felt that way, but that can come on kind of strong and make it difficult to have conversation. So I wanted to explain that in part, and I don't get mad very often, but I get worried. And I kind of see red when I feel like our policies are being ignored or set aside, and when we don't have full disclosure about what we're really looking at. And to move right on from that, what I wanted to do is explain the history that I experienced in the council and what I've been seeing, so that you know, just in a little package. When I first was elected in 2009, if you looked at the immediate, let's say 3 to 5 years prior to that time, the numbers on how much was borrowed look remarkably similar to the proposed 5 years in the plan that has been proposed to us by staff. At that time, what that council, and this is before my time, a couple of years before I was elected, that council realized that their debt service was going up like that. Interest rates weren't as low as they are today, so it went up a little faster, and they looked at what they were borrowing for. Prior councils had said, well, to avoid raising taxes, let's just, we know we've got minimum sizes for our projects, but let's package them together, and then we'll bond them, and then we won't be. They had kind of pushed the limits of the policy that they had, and we're borrowing for small projects and renewable projects, and they watched it start to climb. And so, in short, what happened was they said, whoa, we need to stop. We need to make sure we don't let this happen. We need to cap how much we're going to borrow every year. Let's pass a policy. And that will force us to look at what we're borrowing for as well, and also limit how much we are borrowing. And those policies went into effect roughly 2007, 2008 at first. I was elected in 2009. And I took that really seriously, because when we came into office in 2009, the economy was starting to tank, and we had all this debt, and money was dropping off. We couldn't pay our bills. And I've told that part of the story before, so I'll skip that one. But at that time, looking at saying, all right, if this is really what we want to do, I particularly was active and said, how would this look if we started reducing how much we borrowed, even from the 9 million cap that we have? But show me what it would look like if we stay at 9 million. Because there had been so much borrowing, and they had also stretched out, instead of borrowing for 15 years like the policy said, they'd kind of gone to 20 and then to 25 and even 30 on some things. So it stretched out longer, and there were some bubbles based on how they had borrowed. But it was supposed to slowly start to decline in these 10 years. Those projections that I got in 2009, we should have been, our debt service should have been reduced to 16 million, where am I? 16,696 by this year. Just if we stuck at 9 million even. What we have before us is that somehow that number is still 20,325,000. It's more than we expected. I don't know quite how that happened. Either way, when you look at the projections, and I can share these, there's still some bubbles in 2023 to 2025, just because of when the borrowing occurred and how it was financed. So we're at 20,325,000 this year, for instance. It drops into the 19 millions, but goes back up into the upper 20s in 2023 and 24, and that's with business as usual and 9 million a year. So what I did then was I thought, all right, what difference does this really make? I personally, as I've said before, I want us to do all the projects. that we need to do and that we want to do. It's a matter of how we finance them and how hard we work to figure out, use those smarts that we've got to figure out how to move some money around so that that interest cost is not as great. And I'm going to share with you what those numbers are, and you can decide whether you think that's really significant or not. But I made myself go through it to see. The charts that we got before, by the way, if you just draw a line at 2039, those are pretty accurate in terms of either the $9 million a year or the $13 million a year. So you can see how those years go. If we continue borrowing at the $9 million a year cap, which is in our policy today, and that was voted on back in about 2007, again in 2011, and renewed by this body in 2016, that we wanted to try and cap at $9 million a year, and also be thoughtful about what kinds of things we were borrowing for. That at $9 million a year, our interest, and I'm not looking at total debt service because that's including paying for the things we want to buy, no matter what. But our interest will drop by $2 million a year by 2029. If instead we set our policy aside and borrow $13 million a year, and that's just the round number that had been put out by staff, our interest drops only by $1 million a year by 2029. So it will cost us $1 million a year in interest only, not paying for the projects, if we choose to exceed our policy limits. And $1 million a year, to me, is a lot of money, but when you look at 15 years, typical life anymore of the borrowing we're doing, that's $15 million extra dollars. And I just wanted to share with you those numbers and ask you to keep it in mind as you're looking at what we're proposing to do and how we might do it differently in order to save $1 million a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a question, City Manager, or for somebody in finance? My question is, and I appreciate, thank you so much for that, because it just continues to build on what staff has been explaining to us. But my question is, at this present time, knowing that the market is going to go up in interest rates, and understanding that the cost of the goods that we're going to purchase now is going to significantly change, and understanding that we're looking at a PCI that indicates that if we don't bump up certain projects and start working on them, it's going to cost us even more money. So then I think that the question at this point in time would be for us to really analyze what would the cost of delaying some of the projects that we would do if we did bump up versus us being able, because it's more deferred maintenance is what we're trying to avoid, which eventually will cost us more money and our constituents more money. And I absolutely understand that the intention is to safeguard those dollars, but we're talking about the present value of borrowing today versus the future value of not fixing something before it's more expensive for us to repair as well. Plus the cost of materials, plus the cost of financing, plus. So I'm absolutely with you. And I think that what is being proposed is for a period of time, or is it permanent?
It turned out to be permanent. It started out, the conversation was that way, but the most recent conversation is indefinite.
City Manager?
You could, thank you, Mayor. As far as we're concerned, you could determine what that would be. You set the policy related to that. What we're asking for, and as you look at this, it is a policy that says $27 million over 3 years is what would be borrowed. That's where the current policy is. What we are proposing is 33.6 for those 3 years, so not 39. That is what we showed you would be the max amount. So what we're proposing is 33.6 with the projects that we feel need to be started with regards to those 3 years, and that's what we're proposing at this time. You could establish that it goes back down after that 3 years. So the next year, establish a new policy that says it would be 31. That is something that you can address on an annual basis.
And then my other question would be, would raising it to the level of 33 that you're indicating, how long would we need to do something like that so that we could catch up on some of the projects that we have backed up?
I'd have to pull the list to be able to tell you for sure, but it is, I think, I'm trying to remember what the year 4 is. Is it 11 or 12? I'd have to look at it to be sure, unless Doug can answer that question or someone else. I don't have it in front of me.
Madam Mayor, I would just say that, for example, a major street project is $6 million, so that, $5 or $6 million. So that would essentially allow us to do one more major project over that time period, give or take.
And the reason that I
Maybe two
asked this is because when we were looking at our PCI identifiers, we were shown how if we were able to tackle quicker, and which is the reason that we were voting for fix our street tax, and we were talking about PCI and working on roads, was because we had an understanding that after a certain amount of years, our cost was going to significantly decrease because we were catching up to some of the backlog of work that we had. And that's where I'm going with this. It's like, how much quicker can we decrease the amount of work that we're going to have to be doing on our streets and on these major projects if we were to do this for a season and have a sunset of this so that we could start reaping those benefits of even maybe potentially lowering how much we're borrowing, if that could be a possibility.
Mayor, can Mr. Hawkins address this?
Absolutely.
Nick?
I don't know if I can give you an exact timeline of when that would necessarily occur specific to the streets, and Dr. Peak might be able to give a broader view of that. But just broadly, when we're looking at this, and we look at this on an annual basis, we look at what we think we can afford on a long-term basis. So last week we ran some scenarios by you, and we think kind of on the high end, moving to that $39 million is something we could sustain long-term on a continuing 3-year, $39 million cap. Now, again, what we have in the CIP is less than that. And so we feel comfortable based on, current assumptions that are out there that we could handle that overall general obligation debt load ongoing based on the current assumptions on revenue in our debt service fund, interest rates, the way that they are right now. We believe as a staff that we can continue that. Now, again, ultimate decision goes to the governing body on this, and so we just wanted to provide those scenarios to show you what we could do on a permanent basis without affecting, we believe, and obviously we have to look at this every year, what we believe we could do without affecting our overall mill levy rate in the debt service fund and staying within the other limits within our debt and general obligation policies.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. I just hope that people will consider that in the process of that same time period that I'm talking about. We also forever bought our fire engines for cash, just like we have managed to back off borrowing on the police and even the leases, and just have a fleet rotation for, at this point, all of our other vehicles, I think. To get those out of that queue, fire trucks are now 1.7 million a year, roughly, on average, but we spend that much every single year, so it's not just like a long-term investment, a one-time investment like building a building, let's say. One of the things that we did was raise the minimum, I want to say it's from $100,000 a project to $125,000, in the context of the conversation that, you know what, you shouldn't be bonding regular maintenance and routine things. Yet we have a proposal in this year's budget of, I think it's 2.3 million a year for facilities that we would bond. You know, maybe we need to get a facilities fund, just like we've recently developed a fleet fund, and look at it another way, because that's mostly maintenance. There's a difference between even long-term maintenance, like putting a roof on or having to re-pour driveways and parking lots and so on, than building a new building or building an addition. And so that kind of thing on a bigger scale is what that council figured out they did years ago by rolling $20,000 projects up to make 100 so they could bond them instead of just figure out how to do it within the operating budget. Those were the trends that I saw occur. So when we look in here to say, you know, should we even finance something another way? One of the things that those of us who've been on the council for a while learned when we went to Oklahoma City on one of the inner city trips years ago. In Oklahoma, we thought it was just a really brilliant idea. It turns out state law says they can't do major financing without voter approval. We just thought they did it because they were cool. Anyway, if we did the major construction projects that we consider, whether it's a fire station or a city hall or even other big capital projects like we've done in the countywide sales tax, if we didn't put them in the annual, but we put them out for a vote, even for a 1, 2, or 3 year special assessment for that particular project, that could lower our annual, maintain or lower our annual bonding budget, but still get things done. Just look at it as a different way and say, no, we seriously want to keep that cap on or make it lower. Because what we're finding ourselves doing is putting routine things in that bonding budget and not having the money to do the things that are really capital development projects. So that's enough detail for tonight, but if people look at it with that, I think you'll see it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Deputy Mayor Clear, to get used to that.
Okay, whole other side of the spectrum here. I'm either missed this. I missed this. I don't know what these yellow pages are. Well, the yellow top, and that's added on the back of this that starts with 2020, goes 2024, and there's just a whole list of stuff in between.
Oh, that relates, sorry.
Yes, City Manager.
Councilwoman Claire, that relates to facilities projects that have been considered as projects that facilities would need to do. There was a request, I believe, from you related to itemization of different things that needed to be done. Various fire station projects are mentioned, and so it outlines that.
But it doesn't put them anywhere?
No, it lists them as potential projects that would be done. Some in certain years are identified that they would be done in certain years, and it outlines what they've been identified.
And the others haven't been identified? When are we going to identify them?
Well, that's part of what we're looking at with the 2.3 million that would be available for facilities fund. It would address the ability to projects that were listed depending on their need. They would be considered by facilities staff, Mr. Peak, Dr. Peak, for placement within the project list. And if you want a better description, I can have Dr. Peak come forward.
Yeah, is that like 2020? Because
well, it's various years. If you hit the list, it's various years that they would be done.
But then there's a lot that's not listed at all.
Good evening, everybody. So the list just reflects the current CIP period and what's planned for that $2.3 million budget. We have, I mean, if you're talking specifically about like fire stations, we've talked with the chief about an order of looking at renovation projects for those, and this budget reflects those stations that would fall within this CIP. The intent from staff with this is we've not had a facilities fund for these types of improvements. So this would be an ongoing request that you'd continually have an out year be updated as we bring it into that 5-year planning process. And what we gave you was just a summary by building, by item, equipment, and cost. And so going across the top, 2020, you go down and look at, that's what we were just trying to balance within that $2.3 million budget that we requested and cover a number of different items we see as needs and facilities. Of course, we would work within the program if we had a failure of a system that was in 2021 or 2022, we may move that up within that authorized CIB to address that, but this is kind of our first pass at that plan.
So you had said there was a total of 306,000 for the work orders on the fire stations. Are these the work orders on the fire stations? Does this include that?
So I think if you're talking to the information that you'd requested from the city manager, a lot of that came from work that's been performed through City Works. So some of that includes things that we did through the operating budget. So you still will have operating budget expenses. And this is just talking about the general obligation bond project. There's another project within the cash funds of $300,000 a year that would also be used for facilities.
I guess my question is, there's some stations that don't have heat or air, and they're going to wait till 2024 to get heat or air?
I'd have to, if you could talk, which stations are you specific?
Well, I'll just go through here, the ones that say, like, there's a boiler.
Because we have a couple of station projects already underway that may not be reflected on this list because we probably already have a project. So if you want to give me the specific stations, I'll get with facility staff tomorrow and get you an answer.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, since I went around and saw this is just really, I mean, there's some nights, I couldn't sleep knowing our fire stations were the way they are. And I think this is much more important as far as the CIP goes because of, I mean, I'd rather give $1 million to do this instead of wayfinding signs and bikeways, I mean, for instance. So I really need to know where and when, the plan on when these can be fixed. Because if they're gonna sit there with no air conditioning, we're gonna have a bike path.
I'll be happy to get you that list. The wayfinding, I'd tell you though, was already, I mean, that's one that's already underway and under contract. So that was, and we work to package these within different funds. A lot of the bikeways is coming specifically out of the countywide sales tax. So it has to be used for that purpose. We can't divert it to facilities. And so this was our recommendation of coming up with a way to fund those facilities, getting it in the GEO bond with that 3-year CIB approval gives us the ability to advance these projects in a quicker manner than being in the cash funds, which we have to work on an annual basis. But I'll get you a list on all the fire stations. Sorry.
So remind me, what was the city council support projects?
The intent of that was to create a set of funding that you could use and decide as a group to deal with a particular issue within the community that you felt wasn't addressed by what staff proposed.
Okay.
So if there was a particular project that you felt was worthy of funding, maybe in an out year, or there's a particular project that you felt was important to the community, that you would have a funding you could tag in order to be able to do so.
Okay, and I had asked last time about, we were talking IT, and I had asked for how much a license for Microsoft. I think it was thousands of dollars, and that paid for the staff or something. I had asked for a breakdown of that, and I didn't get that.
I thought we had.
So if I can have that.
Yeah, we'll make sure and get that, but I thought we had. But.
And then, isn't Station 14, what year is that?
It's further out. It's in 2025 or 6.
That's on.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring that page. My bad. But it's 25, which
25?
it's in the CIP portion of the budget.
And then,
versus the CIB. So it's in an out year and would have to come forward in the years in order to be considered for being done.
and then what about 13?
13 we have the funding for, and there is, I've been working with the chief, and we're in the process of updating what we have for a strategic plan in order to be able to outline our intentions regarding moving ahead with 13, the purchase of property, a recommendation on locationing area, and then also looking at our ALS proposals and just providing you an update in those areas. And so Chief provided that information, and it's a matter about scheduling to be able to bring forward a presentation from him to update you on all of our plans related to the fire department and how we're going to do those things. And he's provided me that information. It's really about scheduling with what we have on the agenda with the budget and some other parts right now that we haven't done that. But we're going to probably, in the intent, I believe, is in April. That's what I'm looking at, is in April to present that information so that as we go into the budget on the operating side, understanding that.
And so is he going to also talk about staff, how they're going to staff that?
Right.
And hopefully not take from other places, but hire staff?
Well, the proposal's always been that one station built, one station closed. And so that would be the expectation that we would have in order to be able to staff it, given the additional cost that comes with that new, with a additional staffing for a station. So that's what we're working through, is a proposal that'll outline what we can cover and the coverage that exists in order to be able to do that.
That'll be interesting. Thank you.
Okay, we had several council members on the queue. We have Councilmember Mays, followed by Councilmember Emerson, to be followed by Councilwoman Ortiz.
Oh, wait.
Councilmember Emerson?
I would defer to Ms. Ortiz
Councilwoman
first.
Ortiz. Look at all these gentlemen.
Yeah, he just wants to hear me blow my horn. That has never been my understanding, city manager. One opens and one closes. And I don't know where that came from, but to this body, I will never, ever support that. We have 2 studies that I have in my basement, and I know we've got more studies than that, that has been done. That's why you wanted me to talk. That's been done. It's really sad. We had a study that said that we need one in District 9, and we had the property given to us, board changed, and what did we do? We didn't build in enough time because we couldn't agree on this same thing, on whether we need more firefighters. I know what we've talked about in my years is what if they were to build 13 out by, if they were to build 13, we would take half that company and put it out there until we could agree. And it's been very political. Do we want to add more? You know, blah, 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 blah. But it's never been my understanding that we open one and we close one. There's been a lot about this, and I have to go through my notes. You know, when I got on in 2005, I said the first thing I'm going to do is open Fire Station 3, because it was closed at that particular time. And what bothered me was a good friend of mine, and that's how Fire Station, I'm going to get it wrong here. It's at 6th and Rice Road was built because Fire Station, there wasn't a fire station there, and there was a fire, and Jefferson went all the way out there to Eastgate, and they didn't get there in time. A little girl burned up in a fire. And then so it's always been cross, just if you really go in and you look at the reports, we are a little bit over 4 minutes, and we should be a little bit lower. It bothers me that every district does not have a fire station. That bothers me. It bothered me when Jefferson was closed because we have a lot of people downtown, and now we have even more with the high rises and the people that have to go down there. I know at the DCF office, we're always setting off popcorn, but they've got to respond. They've got to respond. So if you look at, the reports have been, it depends on who's in charge, but it looks like the reports have been however we want to see them. But at the end of the day, I think it's so important that we get this study and we do what we need to do, and that's get another fire station. You know, we got Mars that in their contract said that they would build us a fire station, but we don't want to man it. We've got to get away from that. We've got to get away from that. We really have. We've been very fortunate that nothing has happened. And then, you know, some previous council members just wanted to say, well, there's fire coverage out there. And yes, there is. And that's at the Metropolitan Fire Department. But trust and believe, they've said if a plane or something of theirs is on fire, that's what they respond to, not to the residents. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to look at that. You know, so what station will we close? When you look at it, you're taken away again. The study is very unique, and I'd be happy to hand anybody that study to look at, you know, because the way that we had a study that they came in and they said, well, let's close down Oakland Fire Department. This is for instance, okay? So they did this study and they said that. But when we came together and we talked about it realistically, it didn't, and they said build another fire station further out. But when we got to talking and looking at it realistically, we have not really grown east of that. That area hasn't grown, so it doesn't make sense to build a fire station out there. So it made sense to leave Oakland exactly where it was, other than it has a lot of renovation issues that we need to handle, but that we should be handling anyway. So we got to really look at that and what's really growing. At that time, South wasn't growing, but it is growing now. At that time, District 9, when you look at it, and that was the perfect location for that fire station. You had 227 kids across the street, even more in that daycare. And now look how that is just growing. It's grown. Those people pay higher insurance. People will say, no, they don't. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Because they look at all of that. And I just cringe. I cringe when I think about it. I cringe when I hear different things that go on out there. So I've never heard that. I will never support that. And we've got to look about adding more firefighters. That's the bottom line. Is it going to make our taxes go up? Yep, it probably will. But and I know at one time we were riding 3 to a truck. There should be 4. We can get away with 3, but there should be 4. It costs a lot. And I think, you know, I've always said we need to educate. When you start educating these people about how much the trucks cost, how much their stuff costs, it's not cheap at all. And people are amazed at what the apparatuses and stuff cost. So I hope we'll look at that. I'll be looking to see that, because I'm just very disappointed that we've even waited this long for a study and to come forward. We were waiting on our new chief forever. We've got one, and we need to push it, and we need to do what we got to do and get it done, because we've been real close. And that's another reason why I pushed the smoke detectors to help our firefighters. And we still have a long way to go. But we've been close. We've had some close calls. And Karen, on our trucks, they were just junk. Anytime you had a fire truck that was going down 21st Street and the gas tank falls off on the way to a call. That's how bad they were. That's how bad that they were just that bad. We had one that was black smoke coming out the back. It's terrible. Our police cars were the same way. Had officers I rode with, every time he hit the brakes, his car would die. Now who the heck's gonna get to something like that? So we're not where we need to be, even on our streets. I was told by the time we get through with all this, Mayor, in 10 years, we'll have to turn around and do it again. It's never gonna be a complete process. We're doing a good job, a better job, but we're never gonna get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Mace.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take the topic off of fire for just a second and go back to the bonding that we were talking about earlier. And I just kind of wanted to go on record as saying I'm not entirely opposed to the additional bonding. But I do think that there ought to be some stipulations, if we do go down that road, to make sure that whatever projects we do outlive the bonds by a long time. And I want some bang for the buck, you know, not just in like the duration of the projects or whatever the investment is, but also I think it would behoove us to make sure that these are not projects that can be paid for with the half-cent sales tax from the county or the city. That if there is another funding mechanism that we could use, let's do it. And then also, if we could maybe try and make some projects, things that are expansion projects that would perhaps spur economic growth. I look at our potential for the Turnpike on-ramp, and I think that's a possibility. That's one of those things that we don't have the money for. It's, you know, but it could spur some economic growth on the east side of town. And there are other things. There are other projects like that that I think this might be an option for. But I think that perhaps, and I don't know, it's probably a bad idea to get a list of specific things that we plan on doing, but I think it's something that we need to take into consideration, that if we do this, we need to maybe put some caveats on it.
Thank you. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Got to kind of follow up. Me and Mr. Mays were on kind of the same wavelength there, which probably not good for you. But anyway, yeah, you know, Mr. Hawkins said something tonight which I hadn't heard before, and I may have misunderstood him, but I think he seemed to say that if we raise the borrowing cap, that would help to accelerate the PCI program. Now, I guess I'd ask Dr. Peak to speak to that. And while you're coming up, you know, it's been noted, I believe Mr. Rensher has a story on there right now about all the potholes, and that's a result of, you know, an abnormally wet and a cold winter. So anything we can do, I would be in favor of that, absolutely.
So, I mean, I guess it depends on the duration that you're raising that bonding cap. I mean, what we show in the CIP right now kind of reflects that goal that we set of sitting at 60. I mean, you didn't see an increase in the street funding. It's basically we are adding, you know, like I've said before, we've got 20 other major asset classes that we don't regularly invest in. I mean, we talk about the condition of our fire trucks and our police vehicles. Well, our dump trucks, our snow removal equipment, all those things are in terrible shape. And so facilities, equipment, those things are things we're putting in that 5-year forecast. If there was a desire to accelerate PCI, then we'd also have to look at adding street projects to that.
There's a study coming out, and I don't want to steal the mayor's or Mr. Trout's thunder here, but in a couple days they're going to discuss it. This will be a little teaser. Maybe we'll get a crowd down here for the press conference. But you know, the thing people are telling us over and over and over again is they want the streets fixed as quickly as possible. So I will just tell you, if we're looking to raise the borrowing cap, that's the one thing I'd absolutely be happy to do, especially if we can get more bang for the buck, more mill and overlays. You know, these total reconstructions take soak up so much money and take so long, but a mill and overlay, you can have a whole neighborhood done in a few weeks. So just my 2 cents.
Okay, Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry to revisit this, but I think that what you said is contrary to what I was saying. We are not on the same page with this. I think there could probably be some case studies done of cities who have bonded mill and overlay projects, and then the mill and overlay lasts 5 years and the bonds last 15. And then they've got 10 years with no money. So just to clarify, preservation, in my opinion, that is not the type of thing that would be appropriate for GO bonds.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. I will say that the problem, though, we're getting into these asphalt streets, especially out in my district, is they have cracks in them right now, And if they're mill and overlaid, that preserves the base, so we don't have to go in and do a total reconstruction of the street. Once you lose that base, you can't mill and overlay. So mill and overlay, I want to say, Dr. Peak, is it 10 years, 10-year life expectancy, or?
So it would depend on the street.
On the
In a
base.
local street, we
Sure.
might be able to get a 15-year treatment out of the mill and overlay, but on an arterial, you're 7 to 10 years for a mill and overlay. So, I mean, I'll give you an example, Wanamaker, which we did in 2016, 2026, we're going to definitely need to be working on Wanamaker again, and that was the mill and overlay type project.
Yeah, and so that's my deal. If we can get more mill and overlays done, we are preserving our base in those streets, and that'll have pay huge dividends. You're absolutely right. In 15 years, we'll probably be doing another mill and overlay, but if we don't, in 10 years, we're going to be doing a complete reconstruction of the street at 4 or 5 times the cost. So that's why.
Councilman Lesser.
Yeah, I'll piggyback, back on that as well with Tony, quite frankly, and even some conversations I've had with Eric Bettis, about it. And I'll give you the real life example is go to 17th Street in Fairlawn. And you guys did a great job with the mill and overlay that we took it all the way to the I-470. I mean, it was to the point where it was people swerving. We were going to have an accident from people trying to avoid some of those holes, especially right there over by Arrowhead. And they had to stop there. And you go over the bridge, and I did it just today, going to Bob Carmichael's Perkins restaurant, actually, and was driving down there, and literally the car in front of me was driving like this to avoid, and then the separations on that, now that's concrete there, that has failed, and partially too from the hard freeze thaw and all those type of things, but it literally, she had to slow down to 10, 15 miles an hour to move that. So there again, get a lot of bang for our buck for the mill and overlay, and I tend to agree. Thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. So unusually this evening, I've sat here listening to this discussion, trying to weigh the cons of both sides. This is tough, guys. This is whipping out our credit card to spend money that we don't have for problems that are real that we do have, because the alternative is to raise taxes. Or we can take a good hard look at what's the role of government. Obviously infrastructure and public safety are key roles. What else are we supposed to do in this town? Once we sort out what we're supposed to do, what our core functions are, we need to take a look at every dime we spend on anything else. And that's going to be tough. That's talking about the money we give to nonprofits. That's talking about the youth program. That's talking about TPAC. All of the other things that we fund. Is that really what we should be spending that money on? The answer to some of it may be yes, absolutely. Anytime the benefits outweigh the costs, I think that's probably something that warrants serious consideration. But before we go back to our citizens and say, we're going to spend more money that you all haven't given us yet, that we don't have the ability to collect, borrow against our future, against our children, which now suddenly has more importance to me, we need to take a good hard look at the money we're spending and what we're spending it on. I think we should do that before we consider raising the mill levy or before we consider raising the spending cap. Because otherwise, it's a never-ending circle. Oh, we need a little bit more money. Well, we'll just push the cap up. There's another governmental entity I'm thinking of, Congress, that has just repeatedly done that, and our country will never get out of the 20-something odd trillion dollars in debt we are. And I don't want the city of Topeka doing that. So I don't know that I'll be able to support anything until we take a good hard look at what we're spending money on and justify, at least to ourselves, everything we're spending money on and why we're spending that money on it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
I will keep it brief. Thank you all. This is the conversation I wanted to see us have. It's all money, and so it's not just the idea of this much bonding and, the debt service fund can cover it, because the more you spend, you're going to spend down that fund, it's got to be replenished. It comes from the operating fund. If we want to do more in terms of that routine maintenance, we've got catch up to do, we know that, but to continue it, that money ought to be in the operating fund. So we need to be, even though at this point our procedure is to look at our capital budget first, we just need to be thinking about how that affects the operating budget and what it looks like 10, 15, 20 years from now as well. So we'll keep working on it, but thank you for the discussion.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. City Manager, the $1 million that you have set aside for I think it's $1 million for special projects, I just can't grasp that. I mean, are you giving us all, is it divided by 9 or 10 or, I mean, I don't understand. How's that going to work there?
Councilwoman, it could end up being one project. It could end up being 5 projects. It would just depend on what you identified as being the desired project that you would like to see done as a group. I mean, ultimately, it has to be approved by the group, or at least 6, in order to be able to move it forward. So that would be the purpose, is that there would be, I don't know if you call it a nomination process or a discussion that would occur by people that would be interested in the particular project, that we would say, we want to do this project, we feel like it's important to improve this neighborhood, and this is the most important one, or we can do this one and we can do these other 2. And it would just be something that you guys would look, the council would look at to determine what would be the best place to utilize that. Because it's one thing for us to talk about what we feel we've analyzed through PCI, or what facilities need assistance in order to be fixed up. We can do that, but there may be something else that you determine is important to the neighborhood that needs to be done, and make a decision that we're going to do it in this year's budget.
I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. I just don't understand how it's going to be. I mean, I might come up with a project that you guys might not agree with. What works in my backyard doesn't work in your backyard. And so I don't understand how it's going to be very fair to us. I think I would like to see that go, in the streets or something that we really, really need. That would be fair. But I just don't understand how it would be, be fair. Because if I want a cemetery brick or a cemetery fence, and you guys say that's not important, I mean, somebody's going to get left out. And I think that's money that should be well spent across the board, as opposed to just by 6 votes. I just don't see the fairness in it.
Here.
City Manager, yeah.
I understand that concern, but we looked at it as a potential that, as you see, when we placed it in the budget, it's in year 4. So it's not something that would be authorized to be utilized in this current CIB, so it wouldn't be an authorization. And we did that because we knew that it would be a discussion item that you as a group would need to have, develop a process. There wouldn't be any expenditures of fund in this year, and then maybe you end up in some course period of time through the year, have a meeting and talk about it as a group. How would we do this? Okay, next year, where it's proposed, that would come into the CIB. What would be the process of how we would determine where that money would be spent? And so it's not something that would, we expect expenditure because it's not in the 3-year CIB, but it was put in the year 4 in order to begin this discussion, determine if it's something that you want to do or not do. So you've expressed your opinion, and as a group, you could continue to have that discussion as to whether or not it's something that should be removed, even as a concept, or if it's something that should be left in. And if it's left in year 4, you could then set a date to have a discussion as a group as to how you would look at doing that when you get together, and then talk about including it in the next budget year.
So you're saying so we have 3 years to discuss it, is what you're saying?
Right. You would have, more than likely, it'd be 1 year. You would look at trying to have that discussion as a group sometime in the next, sometime in this calendar year, so you would establish that process when we enter into the budget for next year.
So there's no monies actually there, it's just a line
Correct.
item.
It's a placeholder. That's the way I would put it. It's a placeholder for what could be.
Thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
So this is good old-fashioned politics and what got us great TV ratings in the past. There's 10 of us, everybody gets $100,000, and we all have to negotiate to get more money. So if Mr. Padilla wants to build a pool and he needs my $100,000, it's real simple. I give him my $100,000, so he has two, but my constituents get free access to the pool for 5 years. That's a joke, people. You're killing me.
All right, well, thank you so much for this very thoughtful discussion with regards to the CIB and the CIP. And at this point in time, we would just look up to the next meeting in which we're going to continue this discussion. So at this point in time, we have no other items. I don't think that the clerk, actually, yes, there is a next meeting, so the clerk will start with the announcements.
So March 19th meeting, we have a flag ceremony from the Topeka Cadets Boy Scout Troop. Appointments, we have a board appointment to the Topeka Sustainability Advisory Board. We'll have 3 tort claims and a work comp claim. We'll have a resolution for a noise exception and a special event. Action items include a resolution for a conditional use permit for Great Life North Topeka. We'll have the public hearing and ordinance for establishing a TIF district for Sherwood Crossing. And then Personnel Code Evaluation and Review Committee referral request. Non-action items include a discussion on the Housing Trust Fund ordinance and then continued discussion on the CIP.
City Manager.
I have nothing to add tonight.
Thank you, City Manager. Only thing I'm going to say is I appreciate our male colleagues to the right. However, this is International Women's Month, and I want to say thank you to the councilwomen that work so diligently for their districts and are not only workers, but mothers and just amazing individuals. So thank you for your dedication. And to all the female staff members in the city of Topeka, I also want to say thank you for your work. Just know that you're recognized and that you're cherished. This is our month, so just a big smile for that. Councilwoman Heller. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything in particular except that it's St. Patrick's Day weekend. Do we know who's carrying the banner this weekend? Maze is? Okay, well, I had said that I'd be the backup if she didn't get 2, so I was just checking. It's always great, and so I'll find out. Pardon me?
I'm sure my 2 would do it again.
Okay.
We did turn the banner in from last year.
That's good.
Maybe a month ago.
That's what prompted her to send the email out, right?
In the closet.
All right, well, obviously, 2 of us will be carrying the banner at the front of the parade, but that's always a really great time. I remember years ago going to Kansas City just to see what their great parade was like, and I decided I thought ours was better, and still think so. So have a great holiday weekend, everyone, and that's it.
Councilwoman Claire.
Okay, I have a lot. First, it's my 3 daughters' birthday, Casey, Crystal, and Kelsey, so happy birthday to all them. LULAC is, you need to put these on your calendar, that's why I'm telling you this stuff. LULAC has a fishing derby on June 1st, and you register April 2nd, and you call Topeka LULAC if you have any questions. Noto's Arts and Antique Festival, March 15th and 16th. And Topeka LULAC Senior Center also has free computer lessons to seniors the month of May on Wednesday. So it's free and it's taught by professionals, so call them with any questions. Tomorrow night at Panera Bread from 4 to 8, 20% of all sales goes to Soul Reason. That gives free shoes to kiddos. And they are also having a golf tournament on June 29th. And Carry the Load is coming through Topeka on May 23rd. And so I'll give you more information later, but you might look up Carrying the Load for veterans and how exciting that is for Topeka. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say happy birthday, and you made a challenge to us. And I did take that.
Next week. It's next week.
Well, I did my challenge this week.
Yay!
So I did want to say I was in the grocery store and I thought about your challenge, And there was a young lady in there, and she wasn't very happy that she had to be in the store with her mom. So as she came out through the checkout, I told her that I'd been challenged to do something nice, so I gave her some money. And her name's Mackenzie. Hello, Mackenzie. And she was very happy. So I did heed to your challenge.
Thank you for doing the act of kindness. I appreciate you. Councilman Emerson, have you been kind?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I have. Yeah, probably the biggest thing happening out in District 4 right now, as everyone who lives out there knows, is the 29th Street project. And they have the bridge out, but we also know it's been very wet and very cold. So I also know Mr. Flanagan at the county, and usually that's no excuse for a time extension. So we're still hopeful it'll get done in the amount of time allotted, but I would ask anyone out in District 4, even in other areas of the city, you guys can come over there too. Just come down Wittenberg Road or Croco Road and patronize the Shack. And you probably saw that great article about the Roebucks this weekend who had bought the Vinewood. They have tacos and dollar beers on, I think, Thursday or Friday nights. It's in karaoke. It's a great thing. They have a great venue for weddings. So those, we really have lost in the past 20 years a lot of restaurants and stuff over there, businesses over the southeast side. So please, please, please go over there and patronize them. Let's keep them viable throughout this project. Thank you.
Councilman Padilla.
I want to thank Deputy Mayor Clear for mentioning the computer program over at the senior center. I've offered to take Tony over. That's my act of kindness. But just to honestly follow up on that, that program has actually been nationally recognized by National LULAC, and it's the only one in existence in the country sponsored by LULAC. So it's actually a pretty good program. They've asked the executive director there, Kathy Votaw, and she has gone to other cities to present it in other venues, just because it is a real need. And everybody, even Tony, can learn from that. So thank you for bringing that up. That's all I have.
Councilman Jensen.
I don't know how to follow that. I mean, my gosh. This weekend is the unofficial kickoff to spring, unofficially. I just want everyone to be safe at the parade and the festivities. Get out, enjoy. This is going to be a fantastic summer in our town. Lots of very cool things are coming. And I like to think that this weekend is the unofficial kickoff to it. So get out, enjoy. Hopefully we'll have some scooters at some point for you guys to be on.
Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go back to basketball again, like I did last week, and just congratulate the Washburn Rural girls. Unfortunately, they beat my alma mater in the state championship, but it was cool to see two Topeka teams in that championship, and then also the Washburn Rural boys made it to the state championship. Unfortunately, they came out on the wrong end of that. Also wanted to congratulate Washburn basketball going to the big dance for the second year in a row. Number 3 seed, I think they play Saturday. Unfortunately, it's in Maryville, Missouri, which is like a 4-hour drive from here. So 2.5, is it that? Okay, well, seems longer if you're in Missouri. But so anyways, if anybody wants to drive up there and check it out, that'd be great. Thanks.
Councilman Cord.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to congratulate Washburn Rural's boys and girls basketball team. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
All I have is, I want to say happy birthday to, happy what would have been 23rd birthday to my daughter. That's it.
We have 3 individuals signed up for public comment. The first one is Geneva Smith. Seems that she's not here. The second one is Myron Holter. And the last one is Mr. Ledbetter, who recused himself. Do we have an executive session tonight? We do not have executive session. That being said, this meeting is adjourned.